The Folly of Martin Daucourt by A.E. Milford. Martin Daucourt often attracted the ire of young ladies whose amorous advances he left unrequited. He received postcards, poems, strongly worded ones, sidelong glances, and the occasional brush of a cold shoulder. It was one of the reasons he took the outer road around the village to get home from the schoolhouse, to avoid the awkwardness of said advances. Had he lived in a Victorian novel, which he so wished he did, he would have liked to have been called a cad, though in truth he lived on Cape Cod in 1965 and was more commonly referred to as a pretentious flirt. Martin was a teacher at Father Bronson's day school and lived in a rented back house at the far end of a cranberry bog where the farm met a stunted forest bordered with dunes. The salt air had stripped the paint from the red clapboards of his house, and the cranberry bog frequently left the two-room abode smelling of Thanksgiving. Martin felt this fitting given the general proximity to Plymouth Rock, where, he assumed, the Pilgrims and Wampanoag had first enjoyed the jiggly red sauce. Despite these peculiarities, he enjoyed his small home. It was all he had, and he made the best of it. It was nearing dusk when Martin reached his doorstep, having taken the dusty outer road to the thin footpath which led down to his cottage. He flipped a speck of red paint from his front door with his fingernail and retrieved the day's mail from the rusted mailbox before entering. Several model airplanes, in the style of the Wright brothers, sat carefully aligned on the well-spaced bookshelves he'd built above his desk. He tossed the mail with carelessness onto his bed, knowing full well he'd pick up the letters momentarily and place them in the brass holder atop his green ink blotter. The echo of crickets off the bog drifted through the small window above his easy chair as he sat down to read his mail. He had a glass of beer now, and it clinked to the edge of a ceramic tea plate as he placed it on his side table. He fumbled for the lamp and pulled the beaded chain to illuminate his immediate reading area. He'd not bothered to look at the return addresses when he'd first collected the mail, and was now perturbed to see the first letter was from one Henrietta Sutton, a young woman he'd rode with around Falmouth the previous spring. Despite the brief kiss they'd shared beneath the arbor when he docked his boat, he felt no spark with her, and had told her as such. He'd explained he was a man not often tied down to one place, and therefore had no intention of further relations with her, physical or otherwise. She'd sent many letters of overreaction. He skimmed this one. It more or less professed her love for him again, and ultimately revealed her utter inability to comprehend a casual les hasards amoureux. He folded the letter and placed it next to the ceramic tea plate with more than a little irritation. He took another sip of beer and opened the next letter. This one was from a Miss Eleanor Ellie Paulson, who had been a substitute teacher at the school for 2 weeks in August when Martin had come down with a summer fever. She'd nursed him to health during the warm evenings after class and had become infatuated with him. He'd of course been under duress with the fever and had likely said a few things to her, possibly quoting The Tempest, that led her to believe that they had more of a relationship than they clearly had. Yes, there were a few passionate nights before the fall term had begun, but he recalled no serious discussion of betrothal. After he'd recovered and she'd gone back from whence she'd came, they exchanged a few letters. He'd eventually lost interest and stopped corresponding. She was still writing to him despite this. He folded the letter and put it beside Henrietta's. Martin fully expected the next envelope to contain 3 or 4 pages, much in the vein of the others, and was therefore surprised to find only one sheet of scented paper with no return address. This third letter contained only 5 words. It read simply, "Stay off the road tomorrow." This was not overtly threatening linguistically. However, in the dim lamplight, with the crickets humming outside, Martin felt an odd sense of disquiet. He quickly scooped up his glass and took a long gulp of beer to loosen his closing throat. He read the note again. "Stay off the road tomorrow." What road? The outer road? The main road? The road to Hyannis? He read it again and again as he finished off his libation. By the 10th read, he'd concluded that there was a decidedly dark tone to the whole thing. It seemed to be in a lady's hand, but who could be sure? And yet it was a handwriting he did not recognize. To be on the safe side, after careful deliberation, he resolved to preemptively initiate caution during his daily commute. He couldn't avoid the use of roadways entirely, but instead of walking to and from school the next day, he would take his bicycle. The sun rose with its usual certainty, refracting a rainbow through a crystal paperweight gifted him by a Joan Gorman the previous Christmas. The colors spilled from his bedspread onto the bare wooden floor in a plethora of spectral hues. The brightness did not lighten his mood. Martin found the knot in his stomach allowing him only the constitution to handle half his usual mug of coffee. He skipped breakfast. He set off on his bicycle shortly thereafter. The commute to work was uneventful. He saw no one save a family of rabbits. They startled him as they ran across the road, of course, but he made his way to the schoolhouse without incident. He taught the day's lessons as he usually did. It was nearing 4 p.m. when he finished grading the spelling exams. The autumn sun shone golden through the lace curtains of the schoolhouse by this point. He packed up his satchel and left for home in the dwindling daylight. The main village road ran straight to the cranberry bog over the course of a short mile. It would, however, take him past the grocer and the general store as well as various homes where he was sure to meet those whom he did not wish to meet. He therefore began pedaling toward the outer road, the same he'd taken that morning, confident his bicycle would add a modicum of safety outweighing the extra 2 miles the secondary road entailed. He pedaled harder than usual as he climbed the first hill. Standing above his seat, he allowed himself to dig into each revolution with atypical spiritedness, kicking a cloud of dust he hoped would act as a smokescreen of sorts. Dry sand kicked up with each curve of the road, and he felt secure knowing anyone attempting to follow him would get a lungful of dust and an eyeful of sand. Things were going swimmingly. Martin made it over the initial set of hills with no complications. He traversed the first mile without encountering anyone. At this point, the road curved, the biggest curve of the journey, and fell a few dozen feet before twisting through a small copse of trees. The trees extended another 3/4 of a mile and ultimately led to the back edge of the bog. If he could make it through this tiny forest, he was home free. His basket rattled as he soared down the hillside toward the woods, not braking as he usually would have. His tires scattered the rocks littering the way. He was picking up speed and sensed the spokes shaking as he passed from the sunlight into the shadows of the forest. His vision had no time to adjust. Without realizing what was happening, he hit a dark puddle bisecting the lane. He flew over the handlebars and landed in the dead branches beside the road with a brutal impact. It was night when he awoke. The woodland insects were deafeningly loud. His fingers and knuckles felt cold, and he knew it was late by the crispness of the air. Forcing himself to his feet, he took stock of his limbs and joints and was pleased to find himself uninjured. His bicycle, however, was ruined. The frame had bent in two, and the tires had popped. It didn't matter. He picked up his fuzzy satchel, still slightly dazed, and began walking the dirt track toward home. His eyesight soon acclimated, and he determined it would be less than 10 minutes to pass through the forest. He'd done it hundreds of times, including the previous day, albeit in the daylight, but there was little reason to be afraid. Hadn't he already had his little accident? He'd ruined his bike. That was enough. He forced a smile at the irony of the letter coming true in its own small way. He'd be home soon. He'd pour himself a glass of beer and make shepherd's pie. These cozy visions made it all the more disturbing to hear the stick crack behind him. He stopped short. Was it his imagination? A moment's pause. Another crack. The dense woodland was full of wildlife. Wasn't it possible there might be another rabbit? Perhaps it was a raccoon just waking. He hesitated to turn. He didn't want to give in to his imagination. He listened longer. Another twig snapped. He could feel the blood drain from his extremities. His knuckles were cold again. He formed a shaky fist and turned. She was standing 5 feet away. "Hello, Martin." "Rebecca?" He relaxed his fist. It was Rebecca Prater. She was a local girl he'd first made acquaintance with 2 years before when he arrived on the Cape. They'd shared some lovely times together during a short winter dalliance, ice skating, evenings with cocoa by the fire, impassioned nights. At one point, she'd given him an heirloom of little profundity, her grandfather's cravat or some such token. She was overly sentimental. He'd considered settling down with her, but alas, it wasn't meant to be. He looked at her now with disdain. "What are you doing here, Rebecca?" "Did you have a fall?" she asked. "Oh yes, but I'm fine." He touched his head. "My bike gave out coming down the hill, but I'm all right. I'm just heading home." "I can see that." "Yes, quite. I suppose it's obvious," he continued. "What brings you here?" "I wanted to speak with you." "With me? About what?" She stared without replying. "Rebecca, I do wonder if this isn't something that couldn't wait until morning. I feel I ought to be getting home. My head's beginning to ache. Could we perhaps schedule a lunch for later this week at the boat club?" "You really have no idea?" she asked. "Haven't the foggiest." He took a step backward. Did she have something in her hand? "Rebecca, I think it'd be best if we made a formal appointment when I'm able to think more clearly." "I think right now is perfect." She took a step closer. An owl called somewhere from the distant bog. He didn't wait to hear more. Martin turned on his heels and scrambled into a dash. His legs pumped into a full sprint within seconds of engagement. His thighs burned with each powerful stride as he forced distance between them. Unfortunately, her footsteps were only slightly delayed, and soon her feet were pounding behind him in a matching sprint. He felt himself in perfect physical condition, but she was gaining ground. He refrained from looking back, keeping his eyes forward, running toward the opening where the moonlight was puddled. It wasn't far. He hoped to outrun her and make it to the opening where she'd have to give up without the cover of forest to obscure whatever ill deed she had planned. His legs were truly burning now, yet he found the strength to dig deeper and increase his pace. The opening was growing. Her labored breath was close behind, but he knew he could make it. The forest was thinning out. Starlight was becoming visible. He was almost there. The crescent silver of the moon lay just above the final rise in the road. They found Martin Daucourt at the entrance to the forest beside his bicycle. The local constable inspected the scene and found a crack in the front wheel where a rock or hard object had likely loosened the metal and compromised the integrity of the rim. It was sufficient evidence to deem the entire incident an unfortunate accident. There was no inquest. Martin's funeral was attended by many from the Cape community who lamented the loss of such an industrious fellow. They lauded his good deeds in a way that Martin would have approved of, and, had he been able to look down, he would have certainly hoped to have made up for past indiscretions of which he was no longer proud.